the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with their shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Welcome, 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 ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Case Closed, 4 p.m. Eastern. That's Eastern Standard Time, every Sunday, the place to be. Highest level conversations on the most relevant topics in this space, ladies and gentlemen. And today, as you come in, as you click that like button, as you share the stream, right? As you subscribe, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, basically today we're going to be doing somewhat of a year in review and a projection into the future as well. A year in review based on some of the broad topics that we've discussed through the year in this show, Case Closed, right? Things within the political sphere, the economic sphere, and technologically as well, from affirmative action to ChatGPT to Elon Musk versus the Biden administration and things of that nature, right? And as usual, ladies and gentlemen, we got an all-star panel. Okay, we got an all-star panel up here. Let me make sure I put LAR on top of the African, because that's the right ranking order around here. Isn't that right, Kazo?
Yeah, West Africans and FBA are more worried about aesthetics rather than reality. So makes sense.
There you go. There you go. We'll take it. We will take the swag points, ladies and gentlemen. But let us begin with one of the main topics that one of the main events that happened this year, and that is the question of affirmative action. It is something that we looked at all through the process before the decision was made. We had a couple of shows about it. After the decision was made, we had a couple of shows about it as well. But needless to say, unless you were under a rock, you know that affirmative action with regards to institutions of higher learning and similar kinds of instances has been struck down. Okay? And there's a long history. What is the history? What is the history of case law surrounding affirmative action? Basically, it goes all the way back to 1896 with the separate but equal, and that's Plessy versus Ferguson. Basically saying, hey, you can keep people separate and you're still equal. And Brown versus Board of Education overturned that, basically saying that we have to look at equality under the law. So equality under the law is the main kind of backdrop around which all the various arguments regarding affirmative action has occurred. And equality under the law is the means by which affirmative action was also overturned, because basically saying if you're doing some kind of affirmative action or to rectify some historical injustice and it affects another group adversely, then it is not constitutional. Okay? So we discussed several things surrounding affirmative action, right? How much advantage was taken by, let's say, Black men? Was it a setup? Was it all about white women, for example? In fact, they are the beneficiaries, but that might just be like an after effect. They just went out there and they got it. There's a double minority status that they also have as well. But let's just start here, LAR, and let's start with LAR, okay? So if I were to say something like this, hey, affirmative action, the striking down of affirmative action is a good thing because it kind of removes the distraction. Affirmative action was a distraction. Why? Because it was focusing on institutions of higher learning where the top 1% of any population goes to deal with stuff, right? Meanwhile, the issues of a population, which involves the rest of the 99%, are being ignored, yet we're arguing whether Tyrone gets to go into Harvard. Even if Tyrone goes to Harvard, it's not going to change a damn thing. So now that we've flattened everything, now let's focus on the middle class, the average student, the reading and writing and arithmetic and so on. What are your thoughts about this idea that, hey, yes, strike down affirmative action because it was basically an elite distraction? Harvard is not where most people live. What do you say to that, LAR?
Harvard is definitely not where most people live. I think people were using Ivy League schools as like a class. Like if you can go to Ivy League school, you're going to be in the upper class. And I don't really believe. I believe it's a higher probability you could, but in America, that's not necessarily a true statement. So to me, the whole affirmative action being a distraction, for some people, not it wasn't. Some people base their reality around that. You know, I went to this school, and the interesting thing about it is this: people can go to any Ivy League school, but that doesn't mean that they majored in something tough. And when you hear a lot of the people talking about, going to Ivy League schools, and a lot of people I went to this school and that school, you rarely hear somebody saying that they did something that was relatively difficult. It's like a lot of liberal arts stuff that they're talking about. So to me, it's a distraction as far as class goes, because like, oh, these people can't get into how many what Ivy League schools are in America, like 15 to 30 or something like that, compared to all of the colleges and universities.
Yeah, it's a small number.
So it's like you could have gotten to a great school that wasn't an Ivy League school if you wanted to, and the success rate doesn't make sense. Just because you went to Ivy League school, he says 8, it's got to be more than 8. It's got because there's schools that are considered Ivy League schools that might not be said as Ivy League schools, but to me, it's just like it's a moot point, because and I say this, I'm gonna end it with this. Most of the people who graduate Ivy League schools that weren't legacy students can't afford to pay that debt off.
Mhm. This is very true indeed, tying it up to the economic conditions of most millennials these days and their crazy student loan debt, of which, by the way, the Biden administration has put a kind of a cap on the payments. You can only pay maximum of 5%. So if you owe, in other words, your monthly payments, if you owe $100,000, you're maxed out at $500 a month. That's what because otherwise your payment will be much higher and things of that nature. But yes, your point is well taken. Kaizo, what are your thoughts here? Basically, it's like saying affirmative action was a big distraction. It's like, when men, for example, form some golf club and say no women allowed, right? And it's like the Augusta Golf Club, I believe. I think it was in Florida or something like that. And it's this small elite, small group of people. And then women come and say, hey, we want to get in. But nothing about getting into Augusta is going to change the lot of women, right? It's not going to do anything. So what's the point? You let them in, not let them in, doesn't really matter. So basically saying, look, affirmative action was a huge distraction before. Now that it is out, let's talk about the real meat and potatoes, the actual population, their development of human potential, right? Ability to read, right? Development of human capital, right? And all these other kinds of things, which is most, or shall I say, way more relevant to the vast majority of the population than whether or not you go to Harvard. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I 100% agree with that. But I want to give context to why we even got here in this position. It won't be too long, but affirmative action, like any other sort of social sort of movement, right, is a movement, because you can see in all of in Africa, there's affirmative action in Kenya where I am right now, right? Women are prioritized over hiring, and also the minority tribes, right? The ones who are like irrelevant. They're also prioritizing hiring. So affirmative action is actually a political statement, meaning it's not for whatever it is that you just discussed, Ike. It's the primary cause for affirmative action actually going through parliament and then becoming, policy. It's not really about changing people's lives. It's a political statement of inclusivity. So I think already the people that were promoting it didn't have the outcomes that you've stated there, right? That's why Black Americans didn't, by and large, or Black men in this case, utilize its benefits. That was never really the focal point of it. So yes, I agree with you. Yeah, it's stupid, but the way that they've actually conceptualized it was actually more for show politics.
Well, what are your thoughts regarding, okay, where do we go from here? In other words, what are some political avenues that Black men, in this case, can both help create or fight for or push towards in order to advance? What is Black male progress, or what does Black male progress look like in a post-affirmative action world?
Great question. I believe that the Black male focus is doing things that are actually now relevant to the market. A Black male focused world means, okay, getting into trades, into skilled labor, whether it's tech, that is actually a trade, right? Whether it's plumbing, electrician, it could even be bricklaying, right? Depends. What that means is Black men will have to formulate their own societies, right? Quite literally, right? Whether it's through places like YouTube and the Black Manosphere, where you begin to find people you can work with, you create these industries, and then you leverage these industries to employ your own people. What I've noticed is, if you look at the average pay of plumbers, electricians, even bricklayers, right? People who your teachers used to tell you, oh, you end up as a bricklayer. It's like they're earning more money than most people in offices at this point. So get into trades, skill wise, build corporations, and start working with other Black people. Because and also, of course, as you mentioned, if you look at the Black American reading level at the moment, it's not as high as it should be. So we Black people in America have been failed by that system. So that obviously has to be corrected to focus on functionalism. Can they read? Can they write at an appropriate level? Okay, build sustainable businesses. Don't be relying on the state, because the state will only give you, as what we said, similar to affirmative action, things to look like you're participating, but nothing about permeating through power.
Got it, got it, got it. LAR, do you have any thoughts there regarding, okay, what should now be the focus? Are there kind of like political avenues? We've heard it said, perhaps in this space, and Dr. Thunder sometimes mentions that, Black men are the political X factor. I'm not convinced, in the sense that, you have to be active, to become, to be able to be that political X factor. In other words, to be able to, for your demands to be taken seriously, you actually have to vote a lot and participate a lot, or donate a lot, or knock on doors a lot. You typically can't just say, I'm just going to stay home. If you don't stay home, well, whatever, stay home. The Mexicans will come who will vote, that kind of a thing. But even outside of the political realm, right, which Kaizo did not mention, Kaizo mentioned basically a focus on skills, trades, building things that actually work in the world, man stuff, right? Any ideas, thoughts, additions regarding Black male progress in a post-affirmative action world?
The first thing would be that, for years, Black men have been the number one group in trades. So when it comes to that, it's just, I don't think people realize the underbelly of the stereotype of the Mexican tradesman that comes here and gets paid under the table. What it was all the Black men who have trades, they've been unionized, and you have to pay them a specific rate. People didn't want to pay that rate. They paid it for everybody else, but they wouldn't pay it for us. So thus I'd rather pay somebody under the table thing. So because of all of that, society is kind of in some ways opened the door for rampant incompetence. Because not saying everybody who gets paid under the table can't work. What I'm saying is half of the people who get paid under the table don't take pride in their job. So you're going to wind up in a bad situation. So as far as the political part, Black men vote a lot. It's just, this is probably the first group in a very long time who said, I need my political interests met. So for a lot of people, it's a culture shock, because even when you talk about the civil rights movement, it was particularly black men, you know, speaking for the whole black society. But at the same time, everybody was very active politically. Now what you're saying is, no, we're going to be active specifically about us, and it's throwing people off for a loop, because it's like, what? Well, what about me? You would normally campaigning for me. So this new era of political, you know, hence, political wokeness is creating a problem for people.
Got it. Got it. Makes sense. Makes sense indeed. So, affirmative action was one of the major things that happened this year. We had several conversations about it, broke down the entire history again, the entire case law from Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown v. Board of Education, and all the other uh, legal battles that happened regarding how exactly do you operationalize equality under the law, all the way through to 2023, and Clarence Thomas kind of knocking things down. And well, not just him, but was a majority, obviously, the majority conservatives in the court voting to strike it down. And there was a question that I asked before one of our shows. I'm going to ask it again now. So Clarence Thomas, let me start with Kaizo. Clarence Thomas, I don't know the exact facts, but some say he's an affirmative action guy. Like he benefited from affirmative action regime. Let's just say that's true.
He
Okay.
is.
Okay, good. So he benefited from affirmative action. Some people would say his assignment, if you will, to the Supreme Court was an affirmative action thing, which is not technically true in the sense that affirmative action is a very specific thing about education and getting, so it's not just, it's just a token black guy. You can say it's a token black guy. Okay, fine. Now, having said that, Kaizo, token black guy striking down affirmative action. People say he's pulling the ladder up. He is a coon. Many reasons to call him a coon. Other than that, that's a lot of people think he's a coon. Now, what are your thoughts regarding that? I think it's kind of like the is ought fallacy going on there. Just because he benefited from affirmative action doesn't mean he ought to give some kind of argument for it. I may not like government programs, but hey, if I'm paying into it, something like Social Security, for example, I'm going to get my money. Doesn't mean I should now say, hey, because if this is the case, then anyone who accepts anything, right, needs to start arguing for that thing. What are your thoughts regarding Clarence Thomas pulling up the ladder, if you will? Is he a coon, or was he just being honest that, in his arguments, which are well reasoned, he wrote one of the concurrent opinions, striking down was written by him, where he gave his whole case and so on, basically stating that, not to get into his write-up, but what do you think about him pulling up the ladder, being a coon?
Well, I think it is a larger conversation about whether people should personalize their own specific history into the job or position that they're in, and that's a larger conversation. So I'll take on a specific axiom and say, no, he's not a coon, right? He has greater sort of ideals or ideas, and he happened to have benefited from something. But hang on. How do you even know he benefited from it? Did he? Is there like facts and evidence that he wouldn't have made it in life to the same level without affirmative action? Because that to me, that's an insane assumption that he benefited from
He
affirmative
been
action.
take into consideration the time period. The likelihood of you being a judge in black at that time period, not really well. Being able to go to college, being able to get into to law school, not very well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's a good point there. Okay, so I'll take that and say, okay. So to answer your question, I'll say this: the affirmative action that was needed at that time is different from the affirmative action that is present right now. So at that time, people benefited by being the pioneers opening up the spaces, which now Black people are no longer as denied access to these spaces. They've done more or less what affirmative action was supposed to, which is inclusivity. Have enough Black people in these Black faces in these industries or places, so that then other Black people can again see themselves in these Black faces and want to go forward. So it did what it was supposed to do: open up the channels and potential for Black people. So no, I don't think he's a coon, and I think I'll leave it there.
All right. So LAR, what is your response to the coon question?
He doesn't have to be a coon to be a hypocrite. I think.
Let me just make sure we clarify the hypocrite statement. Do you think he should not have accepted affirmative action? You think he should not have gone to the school? Or you think that having gone to the school, he can't strike down affirmative action? You get what I'm saying, right? Which is it?
I think because he was because he benefited from it, and unfortunately, the way it looks, the way people can spin it now is you were getting paid off by a billionaire at your age now. So were you actually doing it because of your own moral ideals, or did you just get paid off for a kickback? Because you got to take into consideration the family member that's private school was paid for, that was technically still under affirmative action, even though it's a financial thing. But it wasn't him doing it. So in essence, he's against it. He benefited from it, and he was using it with somebody else's money for one of his family members to use the same system. So it comes off as hypocritical. Like, oh, I get it. It's not. We don't need affirmative action no more. We need class.
Yeah,
affirmative action. Yeah, and as long as I'm in the right class, forget all of y'all.
Yeah, because okay, and again, just to kind of elaborate a little bit upon the class-based argument, it's basically saying, hey, there's this kid, he is an upper middle class Black kid, grew up somewhere in New York State, right? Well educated. And I'm thinking about a particular person, actually, Professor John McWhorter, okay? He's at Columbia University, okay? And what does John McWhorter have in common with some inner city poor kid from a broken home and such? In other words, so they're different in class, but they have this color thing that ties them together. And the class argument says, hey, you can't treat John McWhorter, this upper middle class, well-educated, two-parent household Black kid, the same way you treat Tyrone, right? That they're quite different. And to put them in the same net doesn't serve one of them well. You're either going to hurt Tyrone or hurt McWhorter, one or the other. And perhaps in our time, the McWhorters of this world no longer need this kind of assistance and what have you, right? So just wanted to flesh that out.
So can I add something there?
Go ahead, Kaiser.
Yeah, so I got accepted into what you guys call an Ivy League in the UK, right? It was which university was it? Imperial University College London, right? However, I got a full scholarship to do my PhD at somewhere else. It wasn't a bad university, but it wasn't so-called Ivy League. I chose the one that benefited me more. I think all these sort of pushing for some kind of institutionalism, to me, doesn't make sense. You don't make it in life because you went to an institution. You make it in life because you had appropriate skills, interpersonal skills, as well as practical skills, and you more or less put yourself up in the right environment. Even this so-called friends or people you meet at college and all that stuff, that's only one very small, limited way of building a network. So I think the premise is already flawed from the beginning. I think affirmative action did what it was supposed to, which is introduce Black spaces in a cream world. But apart from that, I think Black people need to focus on things that actually work. Build, as I said, right, I'm going to repeat myself, build actionable companies, get actionable skills in certain key industries, and stop the Mexicans from taking all your jobs.
All right.
Just for the record, affirmative action's premise was initially about employment. It wasn't about college. People morphed it into college because they were trying to go to certain colleges.
Shout out to Mike V. Shout out to the chat, by the way. We got Gail, we got Salty Balls, we got everybody leaving their comments. Shout out to TLA, everybody. Now, Mike V, I'll give you the opportunity here to answer this question that has been on the table thus far. And basically, we're talking about affirmative action, right? We know it was struck down. We, in a previous show, went through the entire history with Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown v. Board of Education, separate but equal, and then now equality under the law, and all the other cases that led down to the overturning of affirmative action, presumably under equality under the law. And I think that one of the positions that I think I can infer that you have is that basically, technically, they were correct to overturn it, but from a what you may call a moral or ethical standpoint, you don't think it's correct. So maybe a little bit like LAR saying that basically Justice Clarence Thomas was a hypocrite and stuff like that. So the questions are: A, was Clarence Thomas a hypocrite? Should he not have accepted the affirmative action in the beginning? And also, now that having accepted it, he should have kind of argued to keep it because, not to be a hypocrite? Or do you just stand with the logic of it? If you see the logic and it makes sense that, hey, this is not equality under the law, you have to strike it down. So that's the other question is, what does black male progress look like in a post-affirmative action world? If you can, handle those two concisely.
Hey, thank you for having me on the panel. To answer your question, the first part of it is that Clarence Thomas was looking out for Clarence Thomas's interests, not necessarily black people's interests. And so if you look at Clarence Thomas historically, he was more radical back then, but he has converted himself into a position based on the circle of his peers, i.e. White conservatives. And so affirmative action, he was more along the lines of Malcolm X than anything else. Post civil rights, he then became more along the lines of what you see as a modern day white conservative. And so Clarence Thomas is looking out for his own interests and not necessarily black people's interests. And so we can't necessarily gauge whether or not affirmative action, he was right for, going against affirmative action today, primarily because the people who pad his wallet, who fly him out to these different places are the ones making that decision. And so I wouldn't necessarily make, that comment about whether or not, if he was right or not. Go ahead.
Before you go to the second point,
Mhm.
Was I right in your characterization? Because in your characterization of saying, if you look at the arguments on the table, that the arguments make logical, technical sense. However, you would not have struck down affirmative action for some other ethical reasons. Am I correct in that characterization? And would you mind elaborating before you go to the next point?
Yes, I would not have struck down affirmative action because statistically speaking, we have not reached the parity that affirmative action was meant to garner. And so if you had to look at it from an economic standpoint, black people it would take black people at least 100 years, if not more, to reach the parity that would be necessary to cease and desist on affirmative action. And so we're nowhere near that. In fact, we're probably 250 years behind if you had to look at it holistically. And so I don't see how they're able to rationalize it, because in the Supreme Court case, Justice Jackson asked for the data to rationalize getting rid of affirmative action. They could not provide it. The data that they provided showed that black people were still woefully underrepresented in a lot of these areas on the college campus. Now, from an employment standpoint, we are still woefully underrepresented at the federal level. In fact, the federal government is the biggest employer of black people, especially black men. And so when you think about the data in regards to affirmative action, it's not nearly close to being completed or reaching its aspirations.
Sure. Now you can go ahead to the other point. What does in a post-affirmative action world, right, where certain things have been removed from the table, right? Certain avenues are no longer there, so we can no longer focus on that. And in certain regards, especially with the Ivy League, forget employment, on the Ivy League level, I think it was a bit of a distraction because, again, even if even if you, I think that the most or the majority of the population are not going to Ivy League schools. So arguing about who gets into these elite institutions, which are in some ways a little too elite, was a bit of a distraction when people can barely read. Okay. Now, what in a post affirmative action world does black male progress look like? Are there certain political avenues that should be focused on, created even, and ways that black men can now play? Kaizo mentioned the, go get these skills, get in the trades and do man shit. What do you say?
I say that there still needs to be a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of getting black boys started first. You have to start at the preschool level and actually watching them matriculate all the way into post-secondary education. That part has to be nailed down from a policy perspective. As it stands right now, we don't necessarily have a policy in place because there's one party that's voting against it and there's one party that's advocating for it.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So, Dr. Thunder, you're coming in. We're, again, ladies and gentlemen, we're doing a somewhat overview of 2023. Several things happened, of which we covered the majority of them on this show. Things on the economic end of things, political, technological, Elon Musk, Sam Bankman-Fried, all these other interesting things that happened in 2023. The first of which we're covering and about to land the plane on is affirmative action. So, Dr. Thunder, okay, 2 questions on the table that Mr. Mike V just answered are: what does black male progress look like in a post-affirmative action world? And what do you think about Clarence Thomas? What's this? There's a kind of a hypocrisy argument being made. I don't like hypocrisy arguments because they remove the ability to make logical arguments off the table. Everybody is a sinner. Everybody's a hypocrite. You can write any rule down about that you believe in, and if I question you a little bit, we're gonna find a time where you broke that rule. So therefore, you can't write a rule, right? So just personally, I don't like attacking from the hypocrite because everybody's a hypocrite. But what do you think about the cooning of Mr. Clarence Thomas? And what do you think about affirmative action now that it's gone? Was it a distraction? Perhaps now that that distraction is gone, we can focus on more important things, more things that are more salient to the generality of the population, right? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Thunder? And we'll move to the next topic.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for. This is a great topic for our show today. Good suggestion to wrap up the year. As far as affirmative action goes, so this is interesting. Academia doesn't like black nationalists because black nationalists make many of the same arguments that you'd hear conservatives make, but they make them for different reasons. I believe that primarily the reason that there's a heavy pushback against Clarence Thomas, when you take a look at his, and yeah, I would argue that he's become less militant. I don't know that you necessarily can definitively say it's because of the company that he's keeping. People tend to get that way as they get older. You have less energy, and you have less motivation to push the pile. But the core of his arguments are very similar to Malcolm X's arguments. Very similar. You could do like in music school, they used to do this thing called a needle drop test, and that was they dropped the needle on a record, and this is all music that you're supposed to be studying and supposed to know, and then you'd had to say, okay, what was the name of the song, what was the instrumentation, what was the time period, what was the composer, what was the, all this kind of thing. If you were to do that from writings of Malcolm X and writings from Clarence Thomas, I think a lot of folks would get fooled unless they had actually read all of Clarence Thomas's writings and all of Malcolm X's writings. I think they would get confused. They would get fooled. Now, I also don't like the hypocrisy arguments, because you have to understand that because you argue against something doesn't mean that you should not take advantage of a particular benefit that your citizenship affords you. Okay, so I could be arguing against a particular policy, but I also should use that policy, whatever the policy is, to advance myself, to situate my family, to promote whatever my ideals are, or whatever. I mean, that's just the way that works, and I don't see that as being hypocritical. I would see it as being hypocritical if in the moment, if somebody's saying, hey, you shouldn't do this because X, Y, and Z, and then they go do that. That's a direct, I would argue that would be direct hypocrisy. I don't think hypocrisy exists across a time span. I don't think you can say because somebody argued against something in the past, or rather they're arguing against something right now, that therefore they should have never utilized that in the past. That's just silly. You have to roll with the punches. And frankly, those are the kind of arguments that those arguments don't get posed against white folks. Those are arguments for dusty ninjas. We tend to buy into those, and then we feel guilty for attempting to take advantage of something that has been put in place to benefit all citizens. So I just think that we have to be careful about that. With respect to what does it look like for Black men post-affirmative action? In the affirmative action era, there's very little benefit that Black men derived, especially since it was 84% of the recipients, the beneficiaries, the white women. And then there's a huge percentage offset of Black women that have benefited, where Black men have not been the beneficiaries. If you look at the academy, for instance, there are 20,000 more Black females in the academy than Black males. I'm talking about professors. And this is an old number, so it could be closer to 30,000. It's probably closer to 30,000 now. And this is a number that is ignored. They don't disaggregate the numbers. They'll say, hey, see, look how Black people are doing. But they forget to say, oh, yeah, well, Black men still make up a very small percentage of those who are actually being benefited by these affirmative action policies. I'd also argue that even back during the time when Clarence Thomas benefited from affirmative action, it also would have been a very small percentage of folks that were benefiting from affirmative action that would be Black males. Most of them would have been women. I mean, Title IX screwed everything up. And so I don't see a huge difference. I will say we'll see if Black Girl Magic is really what they say it is. We'll see if that's the case. And for Black men to catch up, Black men would never catch up, because the thing is set up in order to disenfranchise us by disproportionately propping up our women. So women would get over, but it would continue to destabilize the Black community. It would continue to, play into this, racial hypergamy, right? It would continue to make the white man continue to have more access and look better to our females. That's what would continue to happen. So I don't see a situation where Black men, even in continuing affirmative action, where Black men were not the bottom.
Okay, so between you and Mike V, okay, because Mike V said there's a lot more work to be done. You agreed with me, Mike V. Dr. Thunder is also saying there's more work to be done. What I'm saying is, hey, didn't black men drop the ball here? It seems like there's a lot of agency being taken away from black men. Like, hey, all this stuff is happening around me and I'm not in there, right? So Mike V, what would you say to the fact that, hey, if black men are not represented in Ivy, in higher education, it's something that they did, or was it a setup, if you will? Where do you land on that razor's edge there?
That's a bit of a loaded question. I don't know if you put it at the feet of black men, primarily because they're not in control of that part of the system anyways. And so I think affirmative action for black men at the federal level makes a lot of sense when you start talking about federal jobs, not necessarily education. And so black men have definitely stepped it up because of, one, the unions at the federal level, and then and at the state and local municipality level, but then two, that also trickled over into the private sector as well. When you start talking about Teamsters and other unions around the country that participate in different industries, the representation for black men makes a lot of sense in those areas. And so, but there's still a lot of work that still needs to be done. We know that black male labor capacity is very much underrepresented per the number of black men that are available for work versus the ones that are not. And so there's a whole entire ecosystem that is involved in building out workforce capacity. You still need a lot of black men to have their records expunged because of 94 crime bills and other sort of legal structures that were put in place to stop a lot of folks from getting jobs in the first place. That part needs to be solved. The other part that needs to be solved is the upskilling of black men. These are areas that involve vocational education, not necessarily college. Then you start talking about access to these sort of opportunities through workforce development programs where they can actually bypass the normal HR process. There's a whole entire life cycle development that has to be cultivated before we can actually get to that point of saying, yeah, we've reached that milestone. We no longer need that system.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Hold up. Especially if Keisha's in HR.
Well, Keisha's irrelevant to this because black women don't make up the majority of HR. It's actually white women.
No, well, that's true. That's true, but it's not irrelevant because of black folks, black women are overrepresented in these kinds of jobs you're talking about.
What jobs?
In HR. Well, in HR, they're overrepresented. And
if we're talking about industries such as construction, black women are not there at the HR level. We're talking about the areas of such as the electrical engineers, the International Brotherhood of that. Black women are not there for all of that. So how can we actually lay that at the foot of black women when we know that it's white conservative males that are actually and white liberals that are taking advantage of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously the system is designed to facilitate and support members of the dominant society. So that's going to be the case. And if it was black folks that were the dominant society, black folks likely would run things in a pretty similar way. I don't think the issue is not a genetic issue. The issue is an issue of honestly, the issue is multiculturalism. That's actually the issue because it's going to work out the way that it is. The way that things are situated, that's the way that it's going to happen regardless, because if you have a bigger percentage of certain folks, they always are going to have more control of whatever's going on. And they're always going to disproportionately oppress the men of the subordinate groups, and then the women are always going to be overrepresented in the workplace. And if the women are using a lot of this sort of feminist divester sort of rhetoric, if they're divesters or not, if they're using that rhetoric, it represents black men poorly, which makes it's a vicious cycle. It's a vicious circle. So it's poor representation from our women, demonizing from our women from within, and they're going to tend to believe whatever they say. This, I mean, it's a multifaceted issue. I hear you talking about unions. Historically, unions have not been good for Black folks because they've been an institution that's been used basically to prop up white folks and to keep Black folks out of certain jobs. You know, as a musician, if you look at Chicago, for instance, there was just the sort of original Chicago music union. And that union, again, was basically created to keep brothers out. So then brothers had to create their own union. And of course, their union did not have access to the big shows, the musicals and all this kind of stuff, the stuff that actually makes real money that came through. So you still have the same issue. I always look at unions with the side eye.
Well, I mean, that would be true pre-1965, but that's not true post-1965.
Yeah, there is
the unions. The unions are still the same. I'm a musician, so I'm privy
in the musician industry, yes, but in the other verticals, such as the construction industry, such as your Teamster unions and whatnot, though that has not been true since pre-1965. I can't see how that, the AFL-CIO just has a channel on YouTube that highlights all of this, and they post all of their data right on their channel. I'm not sure where you're getting this information from.
So let me drill down on a particular point. I know also, but first of all, Kaizo, you wanted to ask a question, I believe, to Mike V.
Yeah.
And I have a question for him as well, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions to Mike V and also Dr. Thunder. So first, I want to say, okay, do we know what affirmative action is? Like, point by point, what the actual thing is? Because the reason why affirmative action is being removed, etc., from several countries, not just America, in the UK, etc., is because it is actually falling under what they term racially motivated segregation, right? And that basically is illegal under certain laws in certain countries, under certain equality laws. So it's failing under that premise, meaning I'm sure if you know what affirmative action is, right, the outcomes that you want from affirmative action, let's suppose equal hiring, or rather distributed hiring, where Black men, specifically in this case, aren't being kind of put at the bottom. They're real statistical things. For example, Black men, right? Not just Black men, Black people. Let me just state it, right? Depending on your name and also where you're from, how your voice sounds, the accentation in your voice, you are up to 60% less likely when applying for jobs, right? Blind applying for jobs in these HRs to actually get the job. So there's real consequences. So if that's what let's say, if that is a part of affirmative action that you want to still remain, then you should figure out how to lobby certain governments, certain states, in order to actually preserve that aspect of affirmative action. So the general affirmative action is illegal based on certain foundations, several countries, but the outcomes of it, you can actually leverage your and one other point as well. So when I was talking about, Ike mentioned a point about black boys not being able to read. Now, what you can leverage is solutions such as affirmative funding, right? In America, it's crazy how they actually fund their education system. So areas with lower income, of course, receive lower educational funding. So of course, the outcomes are similar, related to that. In the UK, that doesn't really happen. The education system is much better. So I'm saying leverage things like this, whereby it's affirmative funding. Take the aspects of affirmative action that you still value, but isn't illegal based on, not contradicting certain equality statutes, and then move forward from that position.
So to answer your question, they didn't get rid of affirmative action completely in the United States. What they did is they removed the racial aspect from it. The gender aspect still exists.
Yeah, so then they can just go for the gusto, and that's what they've been wanting to do anyway. All of this has been about getting more females in the workplace.
So, Mike V, a last point here on the affirmative action thing, and you're a tech guy. You went to college somewhere, and you saw Black people, perhaps not too many. Likewise with me as well. Undergrad, master's degree, and such. Didn't see many Black people there. Okay. Now, to the point of who's stopping them, what is your answer? Now, I'm not saying, so you can give whatever answer you want, but perhaps it's a challenge to Dr. Thunder in the sense that who the hell stopped these people from going into the calculus class? Like my, I always say that thing, right? It seemed fair. You fill out a form, you do this, you do that, you try to pass this class, you take trigonometry at a community college, make sure you get good grades in it, and you transfer into a 4-year university, and you continue. At no point did I see any, neither Keisha nor a union stopping me. But in fact, there are no black men in that class. So, first of all, Mike V, what was keeping other black men from being in your classes, Mike V?
Well, poor education infrastructure is probably the first thing. I'm one of those few black men, if not many black men, who dropped out of high school to get a GED because my school did not have accreditation in the 90s. It lost its accreditation. So if I wanted to go to a Division I, Division II, or Division III, or Division IV school, I would not have been able to apply because my diploma wouldn't have been worth the paper that was written on. And that happened throughout many black communities in the United States, where you had a lot of schools that were just underfunded, under resourced, and had a lot of people who did not really go anywhere beyond that school. And so the first thing that wouldn't have needed to be done was to shore up the resources for those for the K through 12. And so I think that to Kaizo's point as to how these schools are funded, for whatever reason, the United States believes that this is the best way to actually do it. And in fact, it's been proven through many sources of research, through these different foundations, as well as World Economic Forum, that this is actually the worst way to do it. And so the outcomes that you're getting is predicated on what the country is investing into primary, secondary education, primary education that would lead to post-secondary education.
Makes sense. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on slightly here to something else, but let me go ahead and shout out the super chats here. We have, first of all, One Man Went to Mo. Shout out to his 2 pounds, calling me the lazy Ute. And then we have the shout out to MOT, the dusty troublemaker. Talking about people who don't understand affirmative action, always talk about education intentionally as opposed to the workplace and all those other kinds of things, I would assume. And then we have someone else here. Shout out to the RBR network. Yeah, we got RBR in the house. Shout out to you. And you say, what is 450 years of slavery, racism, discrimination, and oppression, right? Based solely on race, if not affirmative action. Okay, yeah, okay. All good. You see, there's something else that's going on recently, and this has to do with Elon Musk. Okay, Elon Musk versus the Biden administration, right? And let me just play a little clip here when Biden was asked a question about Elon. Okay, and then he mentioned he needs to be looked at, and then following Biden's words, there have been several actions by several federal government agencies, including Fish and Wildlife. Okay, the fish people are coming after him too, regarding him being able to build something somewhere and affecting some kind of fish or something like that. But let me just go ahead and play this for a second, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the actions against Elon Musk.
Mr. President, do you think Elon Musk is a threat to U.S. national security? And should the U.S., and with the tools you have, investigate his joint acquisition of Twitter with foreign governments, which include the Saudis?
I think that Elon Musk's cooperation and/or technical relationships with other countries is worthy of being looked at. Whether or not he is doing anything inappropriate, I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting that it's worth being looked at. But that's all I'll say.
So we got to look at this guy, right? Kind of sounds like some, shout out to Tony Soprano and the like. We got to take a look at this guy now. So what does this taking a look at this guy kind of look like in practical terms? Okay, because this is not just something that is in abstract. After his acquisition at Twitter is when this particular question was asked to Biden, because he kind of bought it in partnership with certain other investors, including Saudi Arabia, such and such. Well, but basically, FCC has recently denied a Starlink application for grant, a grant to Starlink for providing broadband access to rural areas. Okay, Starlink is by far the most qualified in this kind of, Starlink is giving broadband to in war zones. So it's not a question of, hey, they don't necessarily meet the criteria. They are the guys. Okay. Recently, Elon was not invited to the EV summit. Okay. I mean, Tesla, you think of EV, you think of Tesla, to not be invited there, that kind of sends a message. SpaceX was sued for not hiring enough refugees, which is kind of insane, right? Because SpaceX being in concert with the federal government, these are security sensitive programs whereby there's an issue with hiring non-citizens. But to sue someone over not hiring non-refugees, it seems like a very obscure, nitpicky type of thing. And as a result, one of SpaceX contracts has been canceled as a result of this. And there are many federal agencies, as I mentioned, that are kind of attacking Elon. Now, let me start with Kaizo. We'll go to LAR, Dr. Thunder, and then Mike V here. Why is Elon being attacked? One, it could be that Elon is non-union. Okay, Elon is non-union. Joe Biden is a union guy. No judgments on that. Just basically saying, hey, maybe that's one reason. The other one has to do with perhaps the taking away of the certain kinds of controls that they had at Twitter, right? We know about the Twitter files. We know that, certain government agencies were given certain tweets to the people whom do content regulation or content moderation and saying, hey, maybe this one needs to be struck down and such and such. Elon released all that kind of stuff. So their general ideas here is it seems to be the case that they're going after this guy. Biden says he needs to be looked at. Agencies are going after him for things that seem a little nitpicky. What's the reason here? Is it a union thing? What's going on? Start with Kaizo.
Well, I think it's all of the above, and more, right? So the union thing, I definitely see that working here, and also I do think it is the general power thing, right? Elon Musk, whether he really cares about free speech or cares about freedom in any sense, is irrelevant. But the people that support him think that that's what he's caring about, and that's what he's then in turn fulfilling again with the Twitter files and everything else that's going on there, right? Giving people like Alex Jones or Andrew Tate space to communicate through his platform. So I do think he's just not lining up, right? The reason why they don't like him is because he's just not lining up to whatever it is that their agendas is. I'm not saying it's conspiracy or anything, but simple as that, right? They just don't like him. They don't like what he stands for, and they don't trust him because he's not lining up to what they want, and he's not someone who is easy to take down using certain leverages. Whether you're talking about advertising, like we mentioned last time, the guy could take a hit, right? He has so much money that he can still do what he needs to do, right? So all of these things, and also with this whole SpaceX, Tesla EV, these are going to be short-lived tantrums, right, by Sleepy Joe and the American government. At the end of the day, there are greater challenges which they will be forced to reckon with. China is the largest EV manufacturer in the world right now. It's not America. So if they don't support people like Elon Musk, then of course America is just going to keep going downhill. Same thing with SpaceX. These are, again, government funded business ventures which are putting America on the map. So at the end of the day, I think what they're really trying to do is replace him, or maybe somehow make him lose face to his investors and other people, so that they remove him as a face, so that they can again figure out how to push certain things that they prefer.
Gotcha. So temporary kind of gesticulations and regarding not being able to trust this person, and with regards to the kind of trust is going to be the trust of his sobriety. In other words, he's a wild card, as Tanky Butt is saying in the chat, right? So this is a guy that got invited to Davos and didn't go, right? That's kind of a little slap in the face. But, I know that's kind of outside, talking about Davos and the World Economic Forum is a little conspiracy theory-esque, but that just kind of shows the type of person that he is. Doesn't necessarily play ball well. So they might trust his competence, but don't necessarily maybe trust his intentions or his sobriety. From their point of view, he's not going to fall in line, right? So, Mr. LAR, what are your thoughts on this here? Why is Sleepy Joe going after Elon? What do you think of the fact that Alex Jones has been let back in, of which, he actually did a 3-hour, a long conversation with Elon Musk and Andrew Tate on X. What are your thoughts here, LAR?
First and foremost, that's what Netflix movies do to people. Second, if y'all don't know, it's the movie that came out with, I forgot his,
Never Leaving the World Behind.
yeah. And the second thing is he's not trusted because he's not American. That's all. Like too much information for a person who's not an American in America. He's a foreigner who has too much access to American information. So, and he has that kind of information in different parts of the globe. So it's the power, because think about it. There are plenty of institutions, like as far as reach goes, him and Amazon, like Elon Musk and Amazon have, you can say, a similar amount of reach across the globe. So did they have a problem with Jeff Bezos and all the other people that are there? No. Do they have a problem with BlackRock? No. Who they have a problem with is somebody who's foreign who comes to this country. A lot of other people will have this same problem. America is losing financially, which is basically, when the country that's built on capitalism is living in negative terms, you have other people from other places who can capitalize, and that's what they don't want. Thus the love-hate relationship with China. Everything's made in China, but we hate them so much, but it doesn't even make sense. And the companies go abroad. So you got somebody working in reverse who's from, Africa, and comes all the way to America and just using his billions to be all over the place. California, Texas, what are we talking about? Not to mention who's going to take over after he's gone. Is that going to be an American or a foreigner? 9 times out of 10, somebody that's foreign.
It's going to be the Fourth Reich that takes over. Shout out to RBR again. He says African men and African American women have the most advanced degrees in U.S. blacks. Okay, literacy. Shout out to you again. Shout out to you again. Now, President Nixon famously had the enemies.
That's definitely bull, right? That's not true at all.
This is RBR. Come on, we don't comment on what RBR says. We accept
okay.
his super chats and we leave it at that. Okay. Shout out to RBR. President Nixon famously had the enemies list, right? And he had his list, and then the IRS was kind of doing audits on them. That seems a little benign compared to getting hit by Fish and Wildlife and every other freaking 3-letter agency that there is out there. Okay. So it seems a bit much, right? And everything, again, is comparative, because, again, there are other people whom are operating and not kind of scrutinized heavily this way. It might be Elon's fault. Elon doesn't play well, again, with certain powers that be and whatnot. But Dr. Thunder, he brought back Mr. what's his name? Alex Jones, Andrew Tate, and all these other kinds of things. He released the Twitter files, and he's doing all this kind of crazy stuff. Is the Biden administration justified in their approach to, hey, looking at this guy? As Biden said, he needs to be looked at. What are your thoughts?
Man, it was taking a long time for Jim Crow Joe to spit that out. Goodness gracious! I saw you messing around with you started to mess around with the speed settings. He was like, man, this ninja needs to speed up. Anyhow, one thing that conversation that was on X that's been put on YouTube, you sent that to me actually, and that's a really good conversation. I think everybody listening should watch that. I think it was a lot of really good information. It was kind of a particular angle on things. You may or may not agree with the way that they described things, but it was very insightful. But one thing that happened was Alex Jones directly asked Elon Musk if, quote unquote, if the United States can change its laws with respect to becoming president, would he consider running for president? Now, Elon said no, he doesn't want to do that. He's a technology guy. He wants to just do what he wants to do and not have to deal with that. But this is interesting because given that certain folks were scrutinized for, if they were national born citizens or not, it's interesting that Alex is open to the idea of a South African becoming president of the United States. So I think that's a kind of an interesting sort of thing. And there was a lot of butt kissing and stuff in that, especially puckering up by Alex Jones.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of chapstick. But it was still good conversation. And Tate came in, and that was good. I just think it's good to understand what it is that's going on in those kinds of conversations, because it was a very high altitude sort of conversation. So that and yeah, I mean, I think it's okay for a sitting president, to say, hey, we're going to take a look at anybody he wants to take a look at. And I think that he was attempting to be somewhat politically correct, or to take some edge off what he initially said, by saying, not that we think that he's doing anything wrong, blah, blah, blah. He's not saying that anything's wrong, like this. But still, that you should be taking a look. Yeah, you can take a look. And Elon Musk represents, and probably people that really like him, represent Joe Biden's opponents, right? Elon and the people that follow Elon are certainly not the ones telling us that we should do Biden. So you have some of that in there. Yeah, so that's really what I have to say on this. I had a little bit more to say on the affirmative action thing, but perhaps that'll come back around later.
Oh yeah, that's a never-ending topic, of course, especially the post-affirmative action world and the actions that need to be taken politically, economically, within the space of technology, all those other kinds of things, definitely, for sure. Now, Mike V, what are your thoughts here? Is it both from the point of view of, well, why you think it's just basically like a non-union, throwing stuff in the face of the government by releasing the Twitter files, bringing these enemies of the state, if you will, such as Alex Jones, back? And what are your general thoughts on Elon Musk, even generally speaking? Is he a threat? Is he overall good or bad? Should he be feared? Go ahead, Mike.
I'm trying to understand the premise of the question. Could you repeat that again? Just kind of simplify it.
Yes. So basically, there are many agencies investigating Elon Musk. Some of it seems kind of nitpicky, not giving him the grant for Starlink when Starlink is the most highly qualified for this particular program when it comes to bringing broadband to rural areas and such. He's so highly qualified that he's freaking giving the Ukrainian war zone the broadband stuff. Not being invited to the EV summit. It's like, oh, boy, he's not being invited to the EV summit. SpaceX contracts got canceled because he's not hiring enough refugees. That was their kind of their reason. And then Biden stating that he needs to be looked at prior to all these kinds of things happening. We're inferring that this guy's being kind of the nitpicking and going at him. Well, why is Biden justified in doing this kind of thing? Is Elon a real threat? What are your thoughts? And I've gave some ideas as to why you may be going after him, such as the fact that Elon runs a non-union shop. That's one idea, but go ahead.
So I think from a social media standpoint, I think when you have federal government and elected officials on platforms that may have sensitive information in the I guess the private chats that they may have, I think you run a risk as a social media company to say we're going to release something, or you may be holding on to this sort of information, that you run a risk when you play that game. I know Senator Ed Markey had warned Elon Musk about a year or so ago not to go down that path because they can rethink his citizenship here because he's not a naturally born citizen. And so there are certain guidelines that you have to comply with when you start dealing with elected officials in the holding of information. That being said, I think he has tread on Democrats, the Democratic Party, or members of the Democratic Party for the last few years now. And most of his subsidies, the federal subsidies and state subsidies, have come from the Democrats. And so when you think about how much money he has received in federal grants and funding and subsidies, you're talking anywhere between $5 to $10 billion. He would not exist if it was not for the federal government. And so to take pot shots in and take shots at the federal at elected officials, especially the president himself, that doesn't sit very well with Washington. There's certain things that you can say, freedom of speech, but there's other things that is not going to sit well for a lot of folks. And so I think that combine that with affirmative action and as well as DEI and other, the EEOC for that matter, who Justice Thomas was the head of at one point. You had a black man who worked for Tesla back in 2017, who had a case against Tesla for workplace discrimination based on racial discrimination in the workplace. It wasn't until 2021 that they had a settlement of $137 million because it was so egregious, the things that they found in the e-discovery. And so we know why he does not like unions, because he does not want protection for the employees, especially black ones. You're talking about a man who came from South Africa under apartheid. Yeah, he carries that mentality with him. And so I don't.
Just a little bit about the black part, because that's kind of, especially black ones. Come on now, Mike V. Go ahead.
Excuse me? Say it again.
No, you said especially black ones. Where is that coming from?
What are you talking about, black ones?
You said he does not want protection for the employees. Makes sense. I mean, this is a typical, you're either a union type of guy or you're not when it comes to being a capitalist. But you say especially black employees.
There are several cases against Tesla by black employees about racial discrimination in the workplace.
Okay.
This is through the EEOC. You can go on their website. Those cases are there. The only case that really came out was Omar Diaz, a black man who was racially discriminated in the workplace. And in fact, the discrimination was so egregious that they awarded him $137 million, biggest settlement in U.S. history. Now, Tesla already admitted on the record that there was, in fact, evidence of the discrimination, that they would work to do better. It's not that didn't happen. It did happen. But when you think about who's running the company, that makes a lot of sense why it would have this sort of discrimination, because it comes from the top down, just like a fish rots from the head back. So in regards to your question, I think that, Elon is treading on thin ice. I think when you start talking about these Starlink contracts and SpaceX, he's lucky to get any of these sort of contracts, because in other countries, he would never get that the way how he talks. He would never be able to get these kind of contracts. His whole entire existence is predicated on the federal government subsidizing him. And so I think that I don't feel any sort of concern for him at all. I think that he gets what he deserves. And I think that, those funds will be better spent and better invested into black men.
Shout out.
I have to.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, man. I have to agree that I would rather see that money invested in black men. We definitely agree on that. But why do you think it is, if I can redirect, Mike, why do you think it is that he's been given sort of liberty to be critical, but then still getting money from the government? Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because it all related to how powerful, how much money he already has and his alliances and things? What reason do you think that the government has for granting these subsidies and things, especially to someone that seems to have his political view, his perspective, or and as you pointed out, perhaps even a particular bias? And why would it be Democrats in particular granting most of this money, knowing his, coming from South Africa during apartheid and things?
Because Democrats tend to be the party of progress, and so when it comes to technological progress, it makes a lot of sense that a great idea will get subsidized. No different than Lockheed Martin, no different than Boeing, no different than Ford, and the rest of the other top tier companies. But when it comes to you don't see Ford, you don't see Mara, the CEO of Ford, taking shots at the president. You don't see the CEO of Chrysler or even GM taking shots at the president or taking shots at parties. That's coming from Elon, and so I think that he lacks the etiquette that's necessary to do business with the federal government, and so why?
Yeah, but does he? I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
Mhm.
But why do you? Okay, so dealing with the government. Okay, so etiquette. You use the word etiquette.
Mhm.
Perhaps it's in bad taste to take money from someone and then criticize them. Okay, but we're not talking about private associations. We're not talking about amongst friends or whatever. You're talking about representatives of a machine, of a government, and you get whatever you get from the government. You exploit the government to the maximum extent,
Mhm.
and then freedom of speech, right? Then you can say anything that it is that you want to say against whoever. If I can use a more sort of personal example of this. So I'm employed by a particular university. I have tenure there, but I'm also regularly engaged in criticizing academia all the time. So I'm getting a check from academia. Are you saying that I shouldn't criticize academia?
No, what I'm saying here is the way Elon's whole existence is predicated on this. At this point, if he had his own money, he would fund his own ventures. He doesn't do that. He waits for the federal government to provide these resources, and so it's not the same as being in academia. In academia, you do have some privileges to have criticism of your leadership there. Elon is just a citizen.
No, but I was just talking with respect to etiquette. I wasn't talking. I understand that it's to some degree it's apples and oranges, and there's different rules that apply. But I'm just talking about with respect to etiquette, because that was a term that you used, the etiquette thing. Is it bad form for me to criticize the organization that I'm eating from?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I wouldn't go. I mean, just because I get a paycheck, I work in cybersecurity in IT, and I don't go into my into the workplace under the premise that I have some kind of freedom of speech where I can criticize my directors in my CISO. I don't think from that perspective. I think that there's a level of engagement that has to happen where everything is copacetic, and I don't think that Elon Musk understands that. I think that he tends to be a very erratic person, wanting to fight Mark Zuckerberg, openly on social media and challenge him to these fights and MMA matches, things like that. He's not somebody I would want to do business with, and I think that the federal government is taking a very strong position that maybe we don't need to be doing business with this guy. Maybe we can find somebody else to do business with.
Yeah. And
but maybe that's what.
Wait, hang on. Can I ask a question? I mean, can I add something here, right? And I think we're being too. I don't know. We're looking at this too American, right? Electric vehicles are the future right now, right? The European Union is a large trading partner for America and the rest of the world. They already stated that they will no longer be, allowing trade of fossil fuel cars, for example, right? America is in a trade deal with China as well at the same time. America doesn't have time. And as I said, this to me is a short-tempered fuse by Sleepy Joe and his friends. It's not going to last, right? You don't find Elon Musk's everywhere. And he does have enough shareholding in his companies that he can cause issues. So I guess what I'm trying to say, this is not going to be long-lived at all. because the whole point of EV vehicles is actually competing with the next generation of technology, where across the whole world, probably not the third world, right? Singapore, all these countries already signed contracts to ban fossil fuel vehicles. So this is just a tantrum. It's not long lived.
Okay, so before and I'll let you, if you wanted to land something, Dr. Thunder, I'll let you land. But just to interject again with regards to the question here of, well, why Elon? Okay, and it's a what I call the Dangote question, right? Shout out to Aliko Dangote. People say, hey, he's a government creation, right? They gave him this and they gave him that, but you have to have shown something. For example, like, hey, I'm gonna save your space faring industry. It's not really an industry, but the government side of things. I'm going to save you money by doing this and bringing back many people had the chance to go into this kind of very risky, to go into something that's very highly capital intensive. And it's also in the real world, such as, in terms of what I mean by real world is it's not in the world of zeros and ones, right? It's not tech in the world of zeros and ones, but actual machines and stuff, highly capital intensive. It's the most risky thing. You almost got to be like crazy to do that. Why the hell would you want to do that? He did it.
Doesn't seem to me. It doesn't seem to me like the government is going to extend what they've extended to this cat unless they think they were going to get something out of it that was significant enough to be worth taking whatever risk. They probably knew that this guy has FU money and he might act every once in a while like he has FU money.
He doesn't have his own money.
Yeah. This thing is a chicken and egg thing. Again, I call it the Dangote problem. People always say that he doesn't have his own money because the government did X, but I'm always like, look, of course the government. There's certain things that can only be done in partnership with the government, right? But of the list of possible people that could do this thing, this guy won. You could say it was luck, but it's a short list of people that can do it, right? So it's not like, hey, take it from Elon Musk and give it to the next, just pick the next 10,000 people. No, that's not how things work, right? There are people whom have proven themselves to be able to do something. They do it, it works. Government saves money. And you can't just say, oh, well, they could have given it to your dusty uncle, and your dusty uncle would be just as good, right? Regardless of whatever quibbles, you have regarding the person's personality, presentation, etiquette, and whatnot, right? However, moving in the future, they might start to roll back some of these things, okay? Even though Kaiser disagrees, Kaiser says it's just a temporary thing. But they are free to kind of maybe cut down a little bit of some contracts, maybe give some other people an opportunity and whatnot. Dr. Thunder or Mike, I don't know if you had any other points to land on.
Yeah, let me just say this last thing. If I had Elon Musk's money, even if he supposedly doesn't have money, I'd be seeing way wilder stuff than Elon Musk is saying. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. So let's talk. We're going to land the plane here regarding the economy. Okay, this was something else that another hot topic ever since 2020 till now is the state of the economy. Generally speaking, given a broad sweep, we had the bear flu come through along with other things that messed up the supply chain, messed up employment, and so on and so forth. Hence, there was fiscal policy with regards to putting money in people's pockets and monetary policy as well. Okay. And this led to the monetary policy thing was going on prior to that. In other words, the zero interest rate policy called ZERP, right, which kind of allowed a lot of liquidity to flow, especially in areas of such as venture capital and whatnot. Combination of all these things leads to inflation. Okay, so Jay Powell, the Fed chairman, starts to ramp up the interest rates. Okay, in order to fight the inflation that we're seeing. Recently, in the last Fed, his last kind of they meet every I think it's every month, and he mentioned that they're going to put a stop to the increases. Okay. And the market has been pricing in this stop, and that's why the market has been rallying. Bitcoin rallied; it's now over 40,000. The S&P 500 has also been rallying, saying, "Hey, this thing's not going to go on forever. The easing is going to come back, so we might as well start placing our bets. Might as well start buying right now because hey, we're going to get another nice little bump coming in the future, and maybe there will be a recession that will then spike the drop in interest rates. Right now, they've paused the increase. Okay, makes sense. They increased it in order to stop the inflation. Inflation is coming down. It doesn't mean inflation has stopped. It just means that it is increasing at a decelerating rate. That makes sense. But they have not yet started to drop the interest rates. People are saying perhaps when the recession actually hits, maybe 2024, then they will drop these rates. This is the kind of just general economic background there. But what I want to ask the panelists is, in 2023, what did their economic life look like? Okay, because there is a saying that says, a recession is when your neighbor loses their job. A depression is when you lose your job. There tends to be a difference between what people go through in their life and what their view of the general economy is. Okay, so perhaps let me start with Dr. Thunder. In 2023, with regards to your personal economic status, things that whatever facets you want to use and however general you want to make it. Were there improvements, or did it really suck that bad? What happened? What is your man on the street level, Dr. Thunder household economic trajectory for 2023? Did it go up? Did it go down? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. Thunder?
Yeah, for me, I mean, things have improved. I've had to make some adjustments because I sort of transitioned out of one of the things that I spent a lot of time that I've done. I typically would be a musical director at a church. That's been a regular part of my career for the last 20 years or something, And so I transitioned out of that, and I moved back into, doing a lot more freelance stuff. I was doing a lot anyway, but a lot more freelance stuff, and have been really consistent, much more consistent on with my social media, in particular YouTube. And yeah, so that's how that sort of transition changed, and it's actually been better for me because I have more freedom to do more of the things that I want to do, while I'm also I think definitely doing better than I was. I've had some.
Didn't you also become a full professor or something, like another notch on your belt in that academia thing?
Yeah, that is pending, but yes, it's that's what I'm looking towards later this school year. So yeah, some stuff is happening, positive stuff. Kind of leaned more into things that are sort of my first passions or first loves, kind of a thing, and kind of renewed some of that, and it's paid out well. So some transitioning, the problem with working in churches is it's at will, right? So they don't, in churches don't pay into unemployment, right? So they can just be like, well, but I don't like you for whatever reason. We're going to downsize. We're going in a different direction, So that's always sort of hanging over your head, and and that can be sort of an aspect of stress associated with it. But getting yourself out of a situation where somebody can just say, "Yeah, we don't want to deal with you anymore" for any abstract, random reason, is a good thing, because all the other stuff that I'm doing is much more, I dictate what the terms are, so it just works out better.
Shout out to you. Shout out to you. I'm going to go to Kaizo next, and maybe just a little bit, let's say on my side. First, let's just give a kind of one general rule regarding recessions is in times of tightening or recessions, financial tightening, meaning let's say interest rates go up and so on and so forth. Cash becomes way more important. Cash, and specifically cash flow. In other words, a job, to be the basic, most kind of simple example of cash flow. Not everybody here is dealing with capital gains and these other kinds of things, right? But if you have that job, if you have a steady cash flow, or if you have cash stashed, it becomes very, very more important than prior to that. Hence, you can give people your cash and they give you a higher interest rate, right? throw some money in some freaking, put some money in Robinhood now and you're getting 5%. That crap was unheard of. We know that years and years and years, it was like 0.03% or something like that you were getting in your savings account. Okay. So being able to stash cash is very important. I was lucky enough to kind of have some cash, able to expand my clientele for Prometheus Engineering in that year as well, which gave me an opportunity, which kind of helped the cash flow part. So there was like a cash flow that I could rely on, giving me the opportunity to kind of make some more investments in other things, right? So from that standpoint, there's been a vast growth in terms of me pouring money into other areas, other sectors, mainly in Africa, in the agricultural industry and certain other kinds of industries, including real estate and whatnot, right? So in that regard, it has worked out. Cash flow is king, especially when you have recessions and things of that nature. So 2023 working out well so far. If 2024, if the interest rates drop in 2024, another one of my investments is going to do well in the sense of I bought bonds. Basically, what does that mean? Bonds are loans to either a government or a company. The treasury is a loan to the government. Where basically say, hey, give me this money, right? Mr. Ike, says the government, give me this money, and I will give you this interest payments monthly. And then when the thing matures, I'll give you your full money. So when interest rates go up and you buy a bond that is like a 5% bond or something like that, 10-year treasury, 5%, right? That becomes super valuable in the future when interest rates go down, because now you're holding a bond of like 5% when nobody can barely get it. So you can sell that bond, right? There's a bond market, just like a stock market, right? And that thing goes way up in value when the interest rates drop. So if that happens, that'll be looking nice as well. I'm going to sell some of that stuff. But Kaizo next, and then Mike V. Economically speaking, in 2023, from your perspective, how have things worked out, and how are things going to look going into 2024?
Do you mean for general or personally, or what's the?
Yeah, whatever general or personal means. I'm talking about you, your economy, your finances, your cash flow, your business, whatever it may be. How has that looked in 2023?
Okay, great question. Okay, so I'll start off with all my business ventures slash potentials. Yeah, regarding some sectors of business, money's been good, cash flow's been great. Even after losing loads of money, I was able to make some money back, partly in partnership with your company as well. I've made good money from there. YouTube has been great as well. Personal ventures, this is now more of looking into development as well, into like tech and all that stuff. It's moving, things are moving forward, and potential investments. For example, the recent potential partnership with someone who has like 45 acres of land and looking into this whole carbon tax, which is a new way of scamming the economies, right? It's within the whole venture of, again, this is very new, nothing's been done yet, but looking all into that, this is great potential for making money.
All right. Mike V, your personal kind of view of the economy from where you sit regarding to what might have affected you. We talk about inflation, we talk about employment, we talk about interest rates and all these other kinds of things. How has it looked for you to the degree to which you want to divulge on that?
I think it's recovering. I'm doing fairly well myself. Looking more at the international portion of it, especially when it comes to Africa. I just came from Ghana, and they're going through currency shockwaves right now, and they'll probably be that way for the foreseeable fiscal year. That being said, I think that my experience has been that things have stabled off from 2021 and 2022, and now things are looking for the foreseeable future significantly better than the last couple of cycles. And so I think that from a portfolio perspective, I think that the continent of Africa is going to be a major portion of my portfolio 2024, 2025, and think that West Africa is going to be a very strong player in terms of tech development, and see nothing but brighter pastures on the other side. So
makes perfect sense indeed. And go check out, ladies and gentlemen, go check out the Black Brain Trust all the shows, but last time you were doing something that I was going to hop in when you were talking about the prefabrication kind of revolution in the construction industry and whatnot. Was kind of I couldn't. I was in a noisy place and whatnot, but good stream regarding opportunities that are always out there. There's always a burgeoning, evolving market where you can have exponential potential. You can also lose exponentially. That's the nature of volatility, risk and reward, right? Shout out to Lion Legal. And we are ending the stream and with this last question. Okay. And the question is about the economy. And it's about, from your perspective, Lion Legal Incorporated, how has 2023 treated you? Yeah, did you get affected by the interest rate increase? Perhaps are you in the housing market? Did you get affected by the employment numbers? Did you get affected by inflation? How are things looking 2023 going into 2024, Lion Legal?
Thank you, Ike. It's a pleasure to be on your stream and to talk with such an erudite, educated, astute, eloquent individual. How are things in 2023? They were good because I took time to actually study a lot of things, from the stock market to mortgages, investment, property, etc. So I understood that there are actually advantages no matter where the market is. For example, with the high interest rates, what that does is that it means that people who would like to buy property cannot do so. So if you have properties to rent, the rent can increase at that point. Plus, it means that if you want to buy property because less are being sold, it actually decreases the price of properties, etc. So it allows you to get in there. So it's been good for me in that sense. And at the time that I invest, I always look long term. I don't look at short term investments thinking that they're a good thing. I'm a lot more conservative. So I always price in and expect changes in the stock market, changes in interest rates, etc. So 2023 has been good. 2024 should be great, in my opinion, by the grace of God. However, it's not clear what the long-term horizon is going to be when you factor things like AI in, because I think that will be a revolutionary change to the workplace, to the employment rate, etc. And that will also affect the markets as well. And it's not going to be exactly clear what kind of effect it will have in the long term. So that is something that I'm also thinking about factoring in, and it's not particularly apparent what effect that will have in the long run.
100%. And I'm glad that you brought up the AI thing. It's not something that we'll be able to address this time, but I think we're going to definitely bring it up at some other stream, because November 2022 was the kind of introduction of ChatGPT and other large language models into the consumer product space, right? And we're yet to see, on the one hand, regarding the improvement of efficiency with regards to the use of AI. That's number one. And then two, what companies are going to benefit from this. So far, we have seen NVIDIA, the chip maker, in other words, the shovel maker in this kind of case, using that analogy of gold miners and shovel makers, right? The shovel maker, NVIDIA, in this case, making these particular chips, has seen a nice spike. Whom else will see this spike? Will there be a merger of AI and crypto? Seems inevitable for several reasons. And yes, this is a space that I'm also looking at. We're yet to see both the increasing in efficiency of the labor force through use of AI, and also whom are going to be the beneficiaries in the stock market and the valuation of their companies, and perhaps new companies that we cannot yet see. LAR, what's the economy looking like for you personally this year? Did you it seems like I know you have that nice leather couch. I saw that there and I was like, damn, LAR is a nice leather couch. Tell us about your economic situation this year and moving into 24.
In the words of the great Dave Chappelle, I'm broke, nigga, I'm broke. I'll always be broke. I'll always be broke. That's how it's going to go. If it's good, I'm broke. If it's great, I'm broke. If If I'm doing well, I'm broke, and if I'm broke, I'm broke. So this year I was broke, and next year if I do great, I'm gonna be broke. It's gonna always look broke.
I'll send you a super chat next time you're live.
Yeah, I'm almost. I'm a little bit above a Dusty Kenyon.
Oh, there you go. job means just over broke. Just over broke. That's what your salary keeps you at, just so you stay there. But shout out to you. And Dr. Thunder has already answered the question. So we're gonna start with kind of like closing thoughts regarding any of the topics that we've discussed. You know, we started out talking about affirmative action. We understand the whole history of affirmative action, equality under the law, Clarence Thomas, and then where do we move on from here with regards to blackmail progress in a post-affirmative action world. We've talked about Elon Musk, things having to do with technology, and the Elon Musk versus Biden type of situation. And then on the economy, which is a broad front involving many moving parts, we just kind of talked about how we are looking from where we stand, where we sit, and any other thing that you may want to wind up with. Starting with Mike V, what are your closing thoughts regarding this somewhat year in review broadcast that we just did, sir?
I think it was a very good broadcast and touched on some key issues that I think that are pertinent to Black men, especially the Black community as well, and that we hope to have these discussions in 2024.
Very, very well put, sir. Thank you very much. Kaizo, what are your closing thoughts?
Great show. I would like to say that, you know, in terms of affirmative action, we should revisit this conversation with focus on actionable solutions. One simple one that I suggest is have better funding. You know, that money goes into poor neighborhoods so that kids from those areas can also get similar funding and hopefully similar outcomes. Regarding as well, the whole 2023 things that have changed, transpired. We know what's been happening geopolitically with China, American wars. We talk about de-dollarization as well, and all these things. I don't think it will affect anyone anytime soon, but long term, yes, invest in alternative currencies, you know, for trade that are also liquid enough for you to actually do something with them. So I think basically find yourself some kind of trade, look at the market, be one with the market, right? So for example, right now AI is king, but you know they're going to be needing people that can utilize it, can have ideas that are actually relevant to it. So learn and be relevant with what's happening. Learn some kind of you know, if you're into tech, perhaps go learn some kind. And you already have some kind of science degree, go learn computational modeling, right? That's where AI is going to be literally, you know, creating a storm in. So figure out what you can leverage in the market, get and stay with the times, and you'll survive the storm.
Shout out, shout out, shout out to you. Yes, indeed. The first layer is a skill, ladies and gentlemen. The first layer is not just hustle. Oh, how do you get money? You just hustle. What the hell does that even mean? Okay. Anybody can quote unquote hustle. Okay. Everybody eats carbohydrates and proteins, turns it into ATP in their cells, gets energy and does stuff. Okay. That's not special, my friend. What's special is getting a skill. And if you're one of those scatterbrain people who doesn't know what to do, they want to do one thing on Monday and they want to do another thing on Tuesday. Well, you're going to need to rein that in. Find a mentor, find some kind of a program. Okay. Go what there are many channels that are out there that can show you in a step-by-step way how to get these particular certifications, okay, blue collar like certifications and whatnot, so that you don't have to be stuck on this kind of a hustle mindset. The hustle comes later. The skill is the first rung on the economic ladder, ladies and gentlemen. But go ahead, Mr. Lion Legal. What are your closing thoughts?
My thoughts are that affirmative action is founded on a logical fallacy in a sense, because you're stating that the power structure is discriminatory, but yet you want the power structure to afford you dispensation, you know, and that is exactly where a lot of the issues with affirmative action have come from. Because ideally, if you're dealing with a just and good institution, they should say that we're going to correct issues that you've experienced. However, affirmative action has not benefited the intended group, which is Black people that have been discriminated against. So, but there's always a silver lining every time that there is difficulty or unintended consequences which are negative. They also give you a lesson. And the lesson is that we have to really focus on building Black institutions, especially whereby there can be financial benefits that spread throughout the Black economy. So investing in businesses, we have to invest in our own businesses, like, employ people that need opportunities and do things without having to rely on any external structure. So I think that that is the difficulty with affirmative action. But the silver lining is that we understand that we have to be more self-dependent and depend on our own internal structures to solve problems rather than trying to focus on the external ones.
Thank you,
But
thank you,
Lion,
thank you very much.
are Black people capable of building a Tesla? I mean, I just don't think there's some things Black people can do. That's why we beg them to allow us in the spaces.
That's a very interesting question. But guess what? We started the conversation. So, like you said, can we do that? Then we have to look at is the intellectual capacity there? Absolutely. If you talk about science, you can go to any African country. Let me use Nigeria as an example. Even Ike. Ike is an engineer. Like, look at how successful he is. Other people that I speak to, the intellect is there. If you're talking about can Black people access the venture capital, that is a different conversation entirely. How much capital is required to build these institutions? But getting the conversation started is important because you can actually get to the outcome that you seek rather than having a conversation whereby it's just okay, you have to work for a company, you have to do this, you have to do that, rather than build your own company. Because at that stage, you may never get the answer based on the discussion that we just broached right now.
Thank you very much. Yes, and that was a good question, and you brought up a good marker there regarding venture capital. Shout out to Kaizo. We're talking about the euro dollar system. The euro dollar system is that blockage there. But anyways, we will elaborate further. And you guys listening out there, just Google or in YouTube, type in euro dollar system. See what that is. Educate yourself a little bit on it. There's this guy called Mr. Snyder. He's kind of like one of the top expositors of this particular concept about the flow of capital outside of the US and how that makes or breaks you as a country or a company or whatever. Anyways, Mr. LAR, what are your final thoughts, sir? But shout out to Don McKee first and foremost. Don McKee says, objection, he says the show was too short, right? That's what we like to hear, ladies and gentlemen. The show was too short. We need a part 2. But hey, there's going to be a part infinite. We're going to continue this conversation because case closed 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, every week. The place to be, highest level conversations on the most relevant topics in this space. Go ahead, LER, what are your final thoughts?
When it comes to affirmative action, I would say that people don't think about unintended consequences. A lot of times in this country, when you create a situation that benefits one group and throws another one under the bus, you forget all of the fallout. So all these other quote unquote minority groups, they won't be able to benefit from affirmative action like they once did. So you're going to see that similar mindset to when the Great Depression happened and people were jumping out of windows because they weren't accustomed to not being rich anymore. You're going to have that type of mindset go on, and it's going to keep growing and growing and growing. People don't think about it, but because this country is rooted in a lot of racism and biases, you normally let the wolf into your house as long as they're wearing the same sheep clothing as you. So now you're going to see, all these people who are so smart, somehow they won't be smart enough to get in these schools. All these people that were so had such an entrepreneurial spirit, all of a sudden they can't be entrepreneurs like they once were. The system props people up and pushes people down. And when you cut that out, you're going to create a whirlwind of people who thought they were entitled to success. They're going to fail. So people forget about that kind of fallout. Other than that, as y'all were talking earlier, I would say everybody invest in tech figuratively and literally. think outside of the box, use everything to expand your not just knowledge, but your implementation of knowledge. So, because in the near future, as you can see, one job for some people ain't enough. People are doing all kinds of different things, but you need to find different ways to create an income. And if you got some real estate, hold on to it because the prices are going up, they're not going down, and everybody's trying to go into a major city. So don't think you're going to get a deal. For the young people, don't get caught up in a situation where you have to take care of your parents. That's it.
All right, all right, all right. Yes, shout out to Warren Buffett. He made a statement on one of his famous quotes. It's about when the tide goes out, that's when you see whom is swimming without underwear. When the zero interest rates flows out, when the ease of capital, okay, when the capital no longer eases up, that's when you see the people whom don't actually have companies with a functioning balance sheet. They don't have functional, they don't have profitable companies. They're just kind of living up venture capital fund and refinancing and refinancing and refinancing. That's on the company level, but refinancing also happens in all other levels as well, whether it's a credit card or a car loan or a home loan and whatnot. But when these things ease out, that's when you then see, oh, these are the people whom are actually running businesses with good balance sheets and those that are not. And also, some people get freed up because they get fired, maybe from Google, and they're like, hey, F it. I'm a 10X engineer. I'm going to go ahead and start a new company. And then you have new shoots coming out of the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the cycle that LER was referring to. So, Dr. Thunder, you get to take us out. Shout out to Dollar Will, by the way. Shout out to Dollar Will. Check out his channel. I don't know if it's still Dollar Will or the Crypto Gang or what your channel is called these days, but yeah, I think I'm more agreeing with you, Dollar Will, that the dollar will stay strong. This is an obscure side kind of argument here. I was thinking the dollar was definitely going to drop, but it might stay strong. Shout out to Dollar Will. Anyways, Dr. Thunder, what are your final thoughts on everything and anything else you may want to add?
Yeah, good conversation today. As always, make sure y'all come back 4 p.m. next week, Eastern Standard Time. Will either be on Ice Channel or my channel, as is usual. I think it's on my channel next week. So check that out. Also check out Wednesday nights, either on Ike's channel or my channel, and that is Getting Ish Done. Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder. And that's a productivity oriented show. I think in this space, the longest running episodic live stream of its kind, that is in the sort of productivity leveling up sort of space, as it were, on that topic. So be sure to come back and check that out. And yeah, the affirmative action thing, I'll just use this opportunity to talk a little bit more about affirmative action. I don't believe that Black men are going to be particularly displaced by the ending of the racial component of affirmative action. Okay. The thing is that the racial component wasn't really working for us anyway, because what these institutions were doing in corporations and things, that they were just doubling down on hiring Black women so that they could get their two check boxes covered, the double minority business. And we see this in the uptick in women in the workforce, and the reduction of the number of men that are actually in the workforce. So you see that. You also see the effects of really, you see the effects of this and the effects of sort of, what am I saying, socialization, especially in the Black community. You see this in attendance to college, and then in general terms, you see that in the 70s you had a 13% more women. Less women were getting undergraduate degrees. Now it's 15% more than men, right? 15% more. But you also understand that if you're listening, the talking points have not changed one iota. Every once in a while, you hear someone talk about the boy crisis. You'll talk about dusty ninjas that can't read and stuff like this. But it's not framed in a way that would lead you to believe that anyone's going to actually try to do something about this. It's because I think it's the expected outcome. And so toppling affirmative action, I don't think it does anything to make the situation worse in particular. We'll just have to become more reliant, more self-reliant. I think skills in tech are in even skills associated with stuff like skills that you can become like a digital nomad, where you can do your job anywhere you want to. I think potentially are going to be a plus. You can be dusty rich out here. Dusty rich being, your brother, you making 50K. You saving your money. You don't have student loans. You're living on the cheap. You're not trying to bling. You're not flossing, dripping. You're not doing any of that. You keeping it simple. And a 50K ninja is top 1% in the world. You go somewhere else, and that 50K will go a long way. Yeah. So, and you probably have some, extra money for tricking too. So anyhow, so I'll see you all. I'm not an advocate of tricking, by the way, but I'm just stating the facts. All right, anyhow, so that's all we got for y'all. Be well, have a good weekend. Happy holidays. We're coming up on holiday season. Hang out with some friends, family, and all that kind of stuff, and remember what's most important.
Indeed, indeed, indeed. Thank God, or thank the space of all possible computations, as some of us call it. Peace. We're out.
Thank you.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what was behind the curtain, the face of evil lurking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make me get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make me get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.